Craig. Thank you very much. Joining me now in the studio is Joe Magyer, advisor at Motley Inside Value. Thank you very much for joining us. And Craig was talking about, let's start with the battery issue. That's the elephant in the room, so to speak. Right. We don't know what it's going to cost the company to either redesign or redo the battery. And we haven't even discussed the other parts of the planes that they've been having minor issues with, I guess to put it mildly.
Yeah.
How do you look at that problem?
I think you have to keep it in perspective. So only about half of Boeing's revenue or profits actually come from the commercial side. The other half is defense, which is relatively stable. And then within commercial, most of their planes are actually 737s. So it's the smaller planes that we're used to flying. So it's actually a very diverse business. And even though the 787 is very important for them in the long term, right now it's not a huge issue.
Now, could it be a huge? I mean, what
it could be.
It obviously can be, and we saw Airbus, with the problems with the 380 when they first launched, it was delays. Airlines wanted money back. They said, hey, wait a minute, the planes aren't flying, or there's problems with the engines. Whatever the issue might be, they're not having passengers fly on those planes, and they're losing money because of that. And you've got dozens and dozens of airlines around the world watching the situation. They're supposed to take delivery of these planes.
Right.
They're going to ask for financial loss.
Well, I think what you're going to end up seeing happen is Boeing is obviously going to scramble, but they still have about 5x their revenue and backlog. So there are clearly a lot of people who, while still watching closely, are still excited about this. And the reason is you're talking about a wide-body plane that's very fuel efficient. And fuel is your biggest expense as an airline. And that is a very painful expense for these guys that they can't control. So when you're talking about something that's going to dramatically cut your fuel cost, you're willing to be a little bit patient, and maybe it's not the end of the world if someone else has to take their orders first and they figure this out. But if you're a larger airline, you're certainly eager to see this get worked out.
Let's talk more about the earnings report. We saw the profit numbers earlier. Revenue overall, though, was up 14%.
Yeah, definitely.
Where's that coming from?
That is coming from the other planes. So actually planes on the commercial side, other than the Dreamliner, were up 16% in terms of volume, which is very healthy. You're seeing a lot of airlines come back with demand. And the nice thing about selling planes, it's not good if you're an airline, but if you're selling planes to them, is that there's almost constant demand for new planes because they're aging, and there's this never-ending race to produce or to have nicer planes that are faster, more fuel efficient. So that's great if you're a Boeing and selling them.
Every time there's a trade delegation that heads to Beijing, they talk about selling more Boeing planes, and vice versa. Every time there's a trade delegation from China that comes to the U.S., they sometimes will stop in Seattle.
Sure.
So China being a huge market, but we talk about the global slowdown in Europe. Is China enough to offset the slower demand that's coming from Europe in terms of aircraft orders?
I think in the short term, probably not. Europe is definitely suffering. You're going to see a big delay there. But over the long term, I think you're going to see continued demand, a point, 2 points above GDP growth. And that's going to treat these guys very well. And, just speaking to the political angle of this, the fact that Boeing is so well connected, there are very high barriers to entry in this business. So the incumbents like Boeing are very well protected and don't have to worry too much about small upstarts coming in.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much for your analysis on this.